Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the Power BI Arbor Snowflake Connector series. I apologise for not releasing one of these sooner, but as you know, end of term gets busy, 6 weeks holidays, you come back, start term is busy. So I'm going to try and make one of these videos over half-term holidays and end-of-term holidays to release them out periodically that way instead. I'm determined to try and get a few more out this year. So today's video is going to be more about some little tips and tricks and hints of context groups and some color coding formula changes later on. So first bit we're going to look at is about context groups. So I'm going to come to our attendance table, our attendance dashboard, and kind of give you an idea of the problem we're facing. So you can see here, we've got multiple tables looking at multiple different demographic types. So the reason for that is because within the student table, we have multiple columns. In care, gender, free school meal, SEN, disadvantage are all in different columns within the table. So what we want to do is create a new table that's going to join those together. So we can have one table with all of the different demographic types in it. So I've got this from a guy called Steve Livesey, who's the Data and Digital Skills Director over at the Five Dimensions Trust. We've been chatting recently about Key Stage 5 assessment data within Power BI. I saw this on his dashboard and I've kind of had to have it and have to show you. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a brand new table ourselves using two formula types. So let me show you those and we'll kind of talk you through them. So the first formula type we're going to use is the union formula. So we're going to call this the context groups. And the first one we're going to use is the union function. Now, the union function essentially joins two tables together. So as long as the tables have the same amount of columns, you can basically put one table below the other. Same way you can do an append query in Power Automate, not Power Automate, in Power Query. So you can put one table underneath the other one and it will join the two tables together into one. What we're going to do is we're actually going to create our own virtual tables. So we're going to use this select columns formula. And what this does is we're going to create our own virtual table. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the student table. We're going to take out information from that table and we're going to kind of filter it down to say, well, we only want these 5 columns. And then we're going to do that multiple times for each of the different demographic groups we want to look at. So we can create our own columns with our own column headers, and we can also put our own information into those columns into that table as well. So this will all become quite clear and apparent once we get going. So the first bit we've got to do is select the table we want to look at. So we want to look at the students table because that's where all this information is stored. And we're going to create our own, our first column, which is the student unique ID column. And because that's text, we need to make sure we put it in the speech marks. And what we're going to do is we can say, right, we want a column created called student unique ID, and I want you to take the information from this column, the student unique ID column, to populate that column. Okay, so that's an easy one to start with. So we're going to create a table, a column, student unique ID, and I want you to fill it with information from the students table. The next column we're going to do is we're going to create a group column, and we're going to give this group a name. So in this case, we're going to do sex of students first. And what that's going to do is in that group column, it's going to put the word sex in for every student for that column type for this table, and it will pre-populate it for us. And this will make more sense when you see it in a moment. We're going to create another column called result, and this is actually where we're going to put the information about the students in, and which particular context group we're looking at. So we want that to be pre-populated with sex, colons, and then we're going to use a bit of a concatenate formula as such, and we're going to say, well, I want you to look at, if I type it in, and look at this column and join those two together. So in the box, it will say sex, colon, then male, female, and so on. And then we're going to put in an order column. So the order column is what order we want these things to appear in. So it's like a sort column, and that's going to be a number. So we don't need to put that in speech marks. And then we're also going to have a group name as well. And we're going to call that gender. Okay. So we're going to close the brackets on that one. Now the union function works with two tables. So we have to put in another table here that we want to create. So we're going to copy and paste this. And then I'm going to use the Alt-Enter key to drop me down a row, and I'm going to paste that in. So most of this information is going to stay the same, but what I am going to change is disadvantaged. I'm going to now bring in the disadvantaged information as well. Disadvantaged, like that. Make sure I change this one at the end as well. And I'm also going to change the order to 2. And then I'm going to close my parentheses there. So I'm going to hit enter. And this is now going to create us a new table called context groups. So what this means is I can now take this disadvantaged table and move it up slightly. And I'm going to delete the row of disadvantaged which came from the students table. You can see it there. I'm going to delete that. And instead I'm going to go to our context groups table. And what I'm going to do is use the result column and drag that into the row field instead. And now you can see it's brought in more information. So now I've got those as one context group together. Oh, I've obviously not done something right here. What have I done wrong? Oh, I didn't change this. So let's change that, disadvantaged, and hit enter. There we go, that's more like it. So there we go. So we now have our groups together in one table. Now the problem we've got at the moment, as you can see, is it's bringing through the same result for every student. So what we need to do is make sure we link that context groups table to our student table. So what I'm going to do is I'll come into the model view, and I found our context groups, and I'm going to drag it across the page until it's next to the student table. Let's get rid of that as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the 2 student unique ID columns, and I'm going to drag the context group student unique ID column to the students student unique ID column. So you can see here. So I've done it from the context groups to the students table, and I'm going to make sure I've set my cross filter direction as both and click save. Now while that's whirring away, when we go back into the report view, we can now see that the numbers on the page have changed. Okay, so male and female, there's not much difference between them, but you can see the information matches what's here. And what we are going to do now, I've got one I prepared earlier, is we're going to add in some more context groups. So I can come back into this table at any time, and as long as I put a comma, Alt and Enter, and then I can do a paste into this formula. And now you can see I've got in-care students, EAL students, SEN there, all in an order. I can hit enter. Oh, I've got one too many parentheses there. Let's take that out and enter again. And hopefully now, oh, there we go. Now you can see I've got all of those groups here on one page and in one table. And what I can do is I can set the sort order as well. So I've clicked on result. That's the column I want to sort, and I want to sort it by the order number that we put in. So we put in that number into the formula, and everything should be in the order we want it in. Again, you can change that if you want to. You can just come back into the formula itself, and you can just change these numbers around here and here. So you can change the order of what you want to appear. And there we go. So what we can do now is we can delete all of these other tables because we no longer need them, because we have everything we need in that one table above. So actually what we're doing is we're saving some space on our page. So if you want to put more information on that page, you can. There we go. And you can still use it as a filter. So we can still click on it, and the information will still change based on what we're clicking on. And there we have it. So a really easy way of bringing all those groups together. And what you can also do is you can pull in table from pull information from other tables. So Steve has his set up to put in from a ability table. So he's bringing in high, middle, low retainers from a completely different table to the students table. So you can do that. You can merge multiple tables together and have this one list of all your information. But it's a really clever way of merging all those. So another way of using this context groups is actually as a filter. So if we come into our behavior table here, our behavior page, in the past, what you probably would have had is multiple filters. So let's add on disadvantage, for example. Okay, and we'll change that to a drop down. So you probably would have had one for disadvantage. We probably would have had then another one for SEN. And then you would have had another one, I don't know, for, let's say, for in care. See if we can, there we go. And you would have had however many drop downs that you wanted, depending on your school's situation. But the problem is then you've got to make sure that you turn these on and off every time. Just think, oh, why haven't I got any in-care students there? Oh, it's because I've got SE. None of them are SEN and none of them are disadvantaged. Right, let me try that again. True, and you'd have to turn these on and off. What we can do now is rather than using the individual columns, we can now use that context group column of results, and we now have one drop down with all of the different groupings on there that we want. And then we know that we can turn one on at a time, and the information we're looking at is then the information that we've selected, rather than having to remember to turn them on and off. So I'm hoping that's a nice little tip and trick for you to make creating your dashboards a little bit easier. So we don't end up with multiple boxes and multiple tables with information. You can have it in just one neat, tidy table, which I think works a lot better. So the next trick I have for you is about the color coding. So I found this quite helpful. So if you remember on our attendance video a little while ago, we did a formula where depending on what the attendance color was, or the amount, the percentage was, we could turn it a different color. Now the problem here is you have to remember every single time, every single color you want to remember, basically, and the code for it. So what I found you can actually do is you can create each color as its own DAX formula and then reference that formula instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to create within the roll call attendance table, I'm going to create myself a new measure. And what we're going to do is, I've got one up in front I've created earlier in true Blue Peter style. I've got one here that I'm going to call green color, and it's going to reference this particular code. And I'm going to hit enter, and that will just sit as a formula in the background. I'm then going to create another one. This one is for red, so I'm going to do a new measure again, and I'm going to put in the red color. And then I've also got one for yellow, and I'm going to do the same thing again, do a new measure, and I'm going to put in a yellow color. There we go. So now I have, as you can see, I've got three colors on the side here once that loads. I can now reference in any of my formulas. So for this attendance color, for example, rather than referencing the actual code, I can now reference green color. I'm now going to reference yellow color, and I'm also going to reference red color. So the joy of doing it this way is that if you decide you want to change the colors, you can quite easily. So rather than going into every single formula and DAX formula you have that has all of those colors listed, so when we get onto assessment data, you have a vast amount of formulas that reference colors. I mean, looking at my other screen, I must have about 20. I can now just reference that color, that formula with that color, and I can then change that color if I want to. Just by clicking into green, I can now change this and change a number, for example, and change the coding, and that will change on all of my dashboards. So now you can see on the screen here, I've actually got some that have changed colour. They've now gone to yellow instead of the orangey colour they were before. What I could do is also say, well, actually, I want to change that one, and that's going to be the green colour, and that's going to be the yellow colour. So hopefully we'll see a bit of a change on the screen. That should now go green. There we go. And again, I can change the colours within the DAX former itself. Let's just put that back. So again, that's a nice little tip just to make your life a little bit easier. Because I've done in the past, I've forgotten what colour codings I've used on other tables. Now I've got it written down, and all I've got to do is reference that, and I'll have the same colour every single time.